I'm interested in the grant that you mentioned there, Ernie. I think a lot of people don't realize the extent to which the U.S. Department of Agriculture influences what's available in school lunch programs and really the cost of everything in the supermarket. So there's an important role for public policy for people to be aware of how much this public policy affects our choices and whether they're healthy or not. So one of the things I'm curious for Ernie, and maybe you know about this too, Shoshana, with the Obama administration, Michelle Obama has taken on the issue of childhood obesity as one of her priorities. And I know that there are a number of issues that she's proposed, and I wonder whether that may be making more of these kinds of grants to fund healthier choices in the school possible now.
Absolutely. And Mrs. Obama has done a wonderful job at opening up a lot of opportunities for nutrition in the schools. She has just done a marvelous job. The one thing that I don't like, and only from my perspective, is severe needs school districts. Yes, we do get a lot. It does put us to the front of the pack. But why should it make a difference if I'm a well-off school, if you will, that can't qualify for as much funding? Are those students not as important as my students are? I'm thrilled at everything that we do get and stuff, and nothing's handed to us. We have to go after it, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But I just think that this whole country, we should be focusing on all of our students, regardless of what their walks of paths may be, because it is a national problem, obesity, and it starts with all of our school-age children. But, as Dorothy's mentioned, Mrs. Obama has come up with, chefs in the kitchens. We're trying to get local chefs to come into the schools, come up with healthy, creative entrees that are a little bit outside of the box, if you will. Having chef experience myself, I love and I have a passion for being in those kitchens. And what I like to do is bring kids into the kitchen. Unfortunately, they're not able to touch any of the hot stuff or machinery or anything, but helping, watching me cut up vegetables and stuff and knowing what kind of sauces I'm going to add with it, the kids are very interested and they want to know what's healthy to eat.
When you say eating or preparing out of the box, what I think of is out of the processed box and also out of the box in terms of quality of food. And I think that this is a major issue that we have going on right now with our food policy. The USDA gives us food to serve the children, and this food is not necessarily high quality. It may be higher in fat, higher in sugar, that, this is excess food that we're giving. So I think that in terms of food policy changes, we have a lot of work to do. Having said that, I'm actually very hopeful. I just got back a week ago from a New Orleans conference that was on food and justice, and about 60% of what was talked about is food policy. How do we get healthier, more expensive food into the kitchens of our schools?
A lot of this is something that can be accomplished through policy. As you know, I'm sure, Shoshana, and I'm sure they talked about it at your conference, the food bill, which affects so much of how we subsidize unhealthy ingredients at the expense of healthy ingredients. We need to reward farmers for producing healthy foods instead of rewarding them for producing the raw materials for junk food, which is what we do now. And I think that
high fructose corn syrup,
and corn and soy are the two
big
biggies.
ones. Yes,
You bet.
But I think the hopefulness that I share with Shoshana is the emphasis now on fresher foods being felt at many different levels. Not only did the last farm bill that was passed in 2008 increase to a certain extent, the subsidies for fresh farmers who produce fresh fruits and vegetables, but there are many things happening at local farmers markets. People can now use food stamps at farmers markets. There are many new partnerships between local farmers and schools that are developing all over the country, where the emphasis is more on local suppliers of school lunch programs. I don't know if that's happening around here. But again, one of our problems, when we are emphasizing the corn and soy, the fat and the sugar, often the USDA promotes use of materials that are distributed over vast differences. For example, the hamburger contamination that happened last year was because the USDA was promoting a distribution system that didn't allow the contamination to be traced for quite some time. Whereas if you put more of an emphasis on local food production and local food distribution, you're more likely to have better quality, more investment of farmers in
Absolutely.
the
and this is something that the First Lady is pushing for as well, which is urban farming. And if we could get in Willimantic, as well as Mansfield and Ashford and Willington and all of our local regional schools and other places, more gardening. You know, getting kids in touch with what it takes to get that vegetable on our
There's
plate.
plenty of farms in our area. Why not get some more
bet.
gardening going? And I've noticed there's some grants on helping schools set up gardens lately. There's been a lot of grants. I don't know if any schools are looking at it, but that's one possibility. I can't think off the top of my head who's doing it. But Ernie, you mentioned earlier about the grant that you received in Wyndham Public Schools. What kind of outcomes do you have to report on for that?
The reportings on the grants are pretty intensified. I mean, it's daily tracking, it's invoicing. It's all matching up. Basically, you got to match up the quantity that you received to the quantity that you put out per school. So there is a lot of, if you will, housekeeping that goes along with that. But I find it to be very well worth doing, because the payoff is huge. And as Shoshana mentioned, the USDA, with all of its processed foods, school districts, I mean, maybe the community isn't really aware of this, but school districts are rewarded a certain amount of dollars. Basically, they give us a checkbook, and it has an X amount of money in it. And that allows us to go through the USDA catalog, if you will. Now, like the ladies have mentioned, they're great, to a point, because it's all processed foods. There's zero that's fresh, except for your frozen vegetables, corn, green beans, peas, carrots, stuff like that. But let's talk about everybody's favorite. Let's talk about pizza, right? That's a staple.
Every Friday.
Everywhere. Colleges, high schools, everywhere. Even families, pizza. So there is not one pizza on our list that we can buy that does not have a white dough. So what we've done is we said we're going to bypass the pizza. What we did is we took some of our commodity dollars, we put it into a higher grade skim milk mozzarella, and now we're having manufactured for us a whole wheat dough using our government cheese with natural sauce that doesn't have sugar, high fructose corn syrup added.
Bravo.
These are things, and the kids don't know it. The wheat dough looks just like it's white, and you don't advertise it.
They're eating healthy, and they don't even know it.
That's another trick of the trade. But yes, it does cost me more money. I wasn't able to buy my pizza squares through the government. We're talking 3,000-4,000 cases for the year. But that's all right, because participation goes up. And I know that we're doing better for the kids' nutrition. And the other thing is, that old famous chicken nugget. that when you bite it, I hate to use the reference, but it does look like a tea bag that was breaded. It's very dark inside.
Tastes like it.
You don't know what it was made with. It could be eyelids and
don't
all
wanna
kinds.
know.
You don't want to know.
You know what we do know is that there's 32 ingredients
Yes, exactly.
in a chicken nugget.
But what we were able to do once again is there was not a high-grade chicken nugget we could buy. So what we did is we went to Tyson and says, we got some government dollars. Can we put it towards white meat chicken? Can you make those into a chicken nugget for us using just a plain breadcrumb topping, a breading, not a batter? And these products are all baked. We have no friolators in any of the schools, even though we have French fries, okay? Because French fries everybody loves, but if they're made with natural potato, with no emulsifiers or anything, and they're baked. It's a special breading, so they're baked. They're not fried. All of these little ingredients, shortcuts, if you will, are helping the kids tremendously.
Thank you, Ernie. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop for a moment. We have to break to tell you that this is WECS Willimantic, and we're just going to take a short break, give you a public service announcement, and we'll be back in just a moment. Definitely, there's a lot of options, and I think also we can make note of is making small changes that will eventually down the road lead to better health. Over the summer, I basically lost 15 pounds. I wasn't even trying, but all I did was lower my portions of the food I was eating.
Bingo!
And I was adding more healthy food. Being married to a vegetarian, I've definitely lowered my meat intake over the years, and recently I've been adding more of these meatless products, this fake chicken and stuff, and really, especially the fake chicken, you really can't notice a big difference when you make a prepared meal like a chili or something.
Right.
Add a bunch of beans in there, and you really can't taste whether it's real chicken or not.
I think we do have to be careful, though, about what types of soy that we use. The fractionated, isolated soy proteins are really not the best for us. And it's interesting because there's a lot of controversy. We have a local paper, and I recently heard read an article that was written by a woman who is saying, "Oh my God, soy is horrible. Stop eating it. It's going to ruin your thyroid and it's going to give you cancer." It's like there are a lot of people with wrong thinking about soy. Mm-hmm. Personally, not just personally. I mean, I am educated in this. I think soy is a wonderful alternative. But what we don't want to do is use the highly, highly processed soy. We want to use it closer to, tofu is a great soy food. Edamame is a great soy food that, can be added to, Wyndham School salads, and miso, soy milk, all really good options. But we should be careful to not eat too much.
I think,
of the
like with
processed.
anything in life, too much of a good thing is even bad.
Yep.
And I think Shoshona's earlier point about more international focus really makes sense, because all around the world, people have not been used to eating the amount of meat that we have. So their cuisines naturally tend more towards different combinations of grains and beans and vegetables that give you adequate protein without having to add very highly processed kinds of protein.
Well, I also think that meat, when people come to me for counseling, and I've been in practice more than a couple decades now, people are talking about, well, should I be a vegetarian? Should I? And I say, I don't think that we have to be vegetarians, but we have to be smart consumers. And I think that the quality, people are talking all about eating organic vegetables and fruits. And I say, that's all well and good. But in fact, it's the dairy and our meat that we need to be more concerned with. The quality, eating less meat, and at the same time choosing meats that are grown and processed, if you will, harvested, whatever you want to call it, in more humane ways.
I agree completely with you, Shoshana.
Yeah.
But that's again where the sort of meatless Mondays and using pizzas and the menus in the schools that have other things on them besides meat just kind of put meat to the side in its rightful place, perhaps, in much smaller portions, much less frequently, and much more mindfully, as Shoshana has been saying, so that it doesn't have the center stage that it has now, so that a meal doesn't consist of an enormous piece of protein that's loaded with fat and possible contaminants, and then the salt and the sugar and the processed components that go along with the rest of that sort of typical